Pour something flammable into your glass. It's Jaded Gamercast. My name is Lang. With me, as always, is Nathan. Oh, man.
Ghosts of Christmas Past.
Jesus.
I feel like we should be terrorizing some rich people.
Holy shit. Yeah, so here's the thing, right? I am drinking a black tea salted caramel bourbon cocktail. What are you drinking?
Well, I was pre-drinking some 9-year Lagavulin because somehow I drink scotch now. Mm-hmm. Sort of. I'm just starting.
I told you that it would eventually rub off on you.
You know, you're right. It did. And it took Game of Thrones licensing and a premium in order for me to finally fucking like bite that bullet and buy it before I'm like, woo, nerddom. And now I'm like, fuck, I spent how much money? I'm going to drink this.
Yeah, you kind of have to at that point.
But now I am drinking a coffee whiskey, sort of like infused blended cocktail called Coffee Reserve, which is a little lower in alcohol volume, like 4%. It's still fucking strong, but it's delightful.
That's wonderful. Yeah, so that's about as much of the old podcast as you're going to get in terms of like regular stuff. It's an interesting situation, Nathan. And we kind of talked about this. Like I said, we're going to be retreading some old ground here. But, you know, I was okay with the podcast going away when it went away. Mm-hmm. You know, in the sense that, like, we'd been doing it for a long time and we had...
It was like 5 years, man.
Yeah, for real. Like, we'd done it for a very long time and we felt like we had done what we were going to do. We had a nice community, a little community that was very popular and was going... But, you know, circumstances being what they are and the fact that neither of us were really gaming. And then after, you know, the podcast ended, we started doing Dungeons and Dragons more often. I started doing it as almost like a full-time hobby. I probably put more time into it than I ever put into I take that back. At the height of like wargaming, I was definitely putting more time into like painting miniatures and playing games. But like now, like I was saying in that post that I put on Facebook, you know, I'm running 4 to 5 games a week. Mm-hmm. I think right now I'm running 4, not including yours, and one of them I actually get to play in. And so it's one of those things where, like I said, I found another outlet for, you know, my loud creativity and my harsh humor and all that kind of stuff, to the point where I was okay having said, like, you know, I did the podcast for a long time. It was great, but I've moved on to something else. And then these motherfuckers on the Facebook page, like every 6 months would post something like, man, wasn't it great? This podcast. and I was just like, God damn it was great. Jesus fucking Christ. Like, I can't do this. It doesn't work anymore. Like, I put so much time into it before. I just don't have time to do that. So, I mean, again, that was the first time I had posted on Facebook outside of just our little D&D group. But, like, that was a private group. Like, I haven't posted anything publicly in almost 2 years. I didn't even post anything when my dad died. And it was one of those things where I was like, I'm just not doing it anymore. And then this last time, I don't know what it was about the last post. But I was just like, you guys are fucking killing me, man. Like, I just want to forget, you know... It's been 4 goddamn years. How have you people not moved on?
Okay, so in addition to that, because I mean, like, I had my break from Facebook as well, and even the way I engage with the site is basically ratcheted down to near zero. I lurk on a couple of game pages, and I really only post on one specific game page because I fucking adore it. It's my favorite minis game that I play, and the community end game is so small that we're all in the I never get to play. I'm just happy to play this game when I can. Like that is literally the type of community. Like, I played it at Adepticon last year, and despite Adepticon pulling like 3,000 people, there were 14 playing this game, and we were all just thrilled. We were all just so happy to get to play. So it's just like, you know, in addition to those every 6 months on Facebook, I've had a couple of people like reach out to me and like IM me on like Steam because remember, you know, we friended some listeners there, and, you know, even on Facebook. And even they've just been like, man, you know, I really love the podcast. It was great. I miss being able to just like kind of like know what's going on in your life. And I'm just like, you know, it's sweet, that J-list celebrity fame kind of sweet, but I'm just like I've had a couple, I think, more reminders of it. But I agree with you. When we called it quits, in addition to just like regular life exploding like a fucking hand grenade for me, I remember those last probably 10 episodes. We spent longer chatting, trying to figure out what in God's name we were going to talk about on the podcast than we spent on the podcast. So every time we'd go to record, it was like 4 hours, 2.5 of it trying to find something, anything to discuss as a topic. And so when we called it quits, it just felt so natural. Yeah. We were struggling to find content. It felt more like a chore. And then, like, again, my personal life exploded. I moved across the country. I mean, we're still 2 time zones away.
Correct.
It's midnight and I'm starting a podcast.
That's right.
And I've been drinking because it's midnight. So I'm going to be sloppy.
That's good. That's good. See, and like, I appreciate it. Don't get me wrong. I appreciate it. I definitely do. It's one of those things where it was a part of my life for such a long time. And I'm not saying it'll never be a part of my life again. I still paint models from time to time, primarily D&D models. And for the most part, like I said, I do a lot of Dungeons and Dragons and other role-playing games and things like that. And I have a great time doing it. The campaign that I'm running for you, Terry, Matt, and John is one of the things that I've gotten the most out of in the last couple of years. And even talking to John, even though it's on hiatus right now because of some stuff blowing up in his life. I asked him, I said, hey man, do you want me to just NPC your character for a while? Do you want me to, take some time to just sort of space it out? And then if you can make it, you can make it, great. And if you can't make it, you can't make it. I'll just NPC you. And he said, he's like, no, man. He's like, to be honest, this has been the highlight of my year. He's like, I'm loving this campaign. He's like, it's super great. And even Matt was saying, like, dude, we cannot stop this campaign. He's like, it's my favorite character I've ever made. He's like, this campaign is amazing. He's like, we can't stop it. Because I was talking about, well, I might go run it for somebody else. And he's like, you motherfucker, don't you dare. And I was like, all right, fair enough. But like, again, to talk about the podcast, it always sort of surprised me when people would post, because I don't go on Facebook very much other than Messenger. And I've turned off all notifications, so I get no notifications for anything anymore. So it would be like days or weeks later, I would see somebody post something saying like, oh man, wouldn't it be great? And I because as a rule, I'm like, I'm not going to comment, not going to like anything, not going to say anything, because I'm not doing this anymore. If I do, I feel like I'm opening the door. And, like I said, I don't know what it was about the last one, because I've had this thought on and off for about a year. And when you like shot me the fucking picture of Kayvon's Shrike, and you're like, this is why I missed the podcast. I almost started it back up right then, just for that. I was like, oh my God, this is the worst.
Well, like, and that's the thing for me is like, every now and then, because like, like fuck all of you. This is a sappy moment between me and my best friend. So whatever. There have been times where I'm just like, fuck, I missed the podcast because it was a chance. Like every week we got to sit down and it was like I was in your fucking house again and we were just hanging out and we were chit-chatting. And like, honestly, the last 3 years, because it has been that long since I moved out here, it's something that I've missed. It's something that I've missed, being able to just basically hang out with my best friend, because we had that weekly time slot, which we always fucking moved because it was supposed to be Fridays. And then we'd always inevitably end up doing it Sunday morning because the podcast had to go out on Monday. So, like I'm busy, like, no shit, sorry, I'm traveling to some fucking derby tournament in the middle of like, but fuck nowhere. Or you made plans because like it's Friday night. I don't expect you to just reserve it to drink in your basement every week.
Well, it was the way to stay connected, right? And, it's like I said in the post, to sort of, laugh and joke and connect with people on a level that I don't normally get to do. My wife is an introvert, so we don't have a lot of friends that we hang out with on a regular basis. And so that has sort of shrunken my friend circle down significantly. And because I don't tabletop game anymore, it's even less. Most of what I do is online through Roll20 or through other groups. I started running a Dungeons and Dragons game for my Destiny 2 clan. That's the nerdiest thing that's ever come out of my mouth. But they're having a great time. Most of them had never played Dungeons and Dragons before, and they would say like, "Hey, you coming to the raid on Tuesday?" And I'm like, "I'm running Dungeons and Dragons, can't do it." And I just said it enough times that one guy was like, "Hey, man, I've never played Dungeons and Dragons. Like, what would you think about running it?" So we've got a good group, plays every week. They're absolutely horrible. They party wiped on like the third game, but I didn't kill them. Obviously, it was just one of those things where.
What, like how the first 4 goblin ambush should have been a party wipe for us in the starter set, but you fudged the shit out of the rolls because we were rolling like pants, man. Like it was bad.
Yeah, no, they all went down in the Red Brand hideout in Phandalin. Yeah, it was pretty good. So I had to do like the next game where they were all captured. It was a great time. But what would happen is we would get together for Dungeons and Dragons. We'd all jump on Skype and like we were shooting the shit on Skype before Dungeons and Dragons to the point where like somebody had to be like, all right, guys, we've been talking for 45 minutes. Like we genuinely need to play this game because it's already like 10:30, midnight, whatever it was for you guys out where you are. So we would have to like always cut the conversation short. And it was like, just that little bit in your veins to get you hooked again.
Oh,
to
yeah,
you go, like,
for sure.
Man, like if only there was the podcast. But I will give credit where credit is due. The hardcore people who stayed in the Jaded Gamercast group, who continued posting and who continued, bugging us about it. It worked. We're here. We're recording a podcast. So most of this is just going to be talking about what our lives have been like for the last 4 years, what we're into, a lot of the stuff that we're doing. The format of the podcast going forward is up in the air for the most part. Right now we're talking about putting out a slightly longer episode once a month. And seeing if we can make that work and getting back to doing that on a regular basis. And if all of that is good and all of that feels like it's going in the right direction, great. Maybe we'll aim for 2 weeks, every 2 weeks or something like that. But I don't know. Like I said, I'm very, very busy in terms of running Dungeons and Dragons, but I miss this. I miss being able to sit down and talk to you or talk to Terry. When I called you after Rise of Skywalker, that was because I missed the fucking podcast. And it was like a 40-minute conversation as I'm like cussing really loud in the room beside my son's taekwondo, which I found out afterwards they could like hear me just be like fucking Emperor, right? And then fucking this, like it was a strange eye-opening moment. And I think the post like immediately preceded that to the point where I was like, God fucking damn it. It's so close. But here we are. So, Nathan.
Yes.
What have you been doing with yourself?
Oh, snap. See, it's funny because you have talked about how you are super duper busy now, but I moved to a place whose population is literally 1/7 the size of Calgary where I used to live. And so, like, to give you an idea, rush hour where I live means you got stopped at a red light. Like rush hour isn't a thing. I can go edge to edge of this place in about 12 minutes if I decide to not take the one freeway we have going through town, in which case I can do it in about 6 minutes. So I live somewhere super small. I work from home. My wife works from home. The kid got so old that she's too cool for me to like walk her to the bus stop and pick her up now. And I quit roller derby. So basically, I've got nothing but time because I don't commute anymore. I don't do derby practice like 3 days a week and then every fucking weekend. And so in the last 3 years, basically since we quit, I've kind of like dived into minis games again in a way that I hadn't since like before roller derby. Because it's just like, roller derby was my time sink. It was the thing that I did 2 to 3 nights a week. And like I said, every weekend, the last year that I did roller derby, which was the last year of the podcast, because the local leagues where I moved to filled with a bunch of jerks So I was just like, fuck all of you. Why am I paying tolls to cross an international border and like dealing with tolls and customs just to deal with assholes? Like, fuck all of you. So I quit Derby. But that last year, I worked 95 games in that calendar year, just the calendar year, like 2016. So I was just like, that was all of my time. So when I quit, I've painted more minis in the last 3 years than probably the entire run of the podcast. I still play a shitload of games because all of our podcasts, like, hey, look how cheap this starter set. That's content that never went away. Like that thing. So like, I kid you not, a new game just launched in December. And I was at the game store and I was like, oh, that's finally out. I'll just grab the starter set, $65, and it's a 2-player. I just bought it. Didn't know anything about the game. I played it. I'm like, it's okay. But like that podcast habit of like, oh, we need content. Shit's drilled in.
Better pick that shit up. Yeah, man. I do remember when you were doing the Derby hardcore, and it was always the thing that pushed our podcast back, or you were like, listen, man, I took a hit, or I'm fucking beat to hell. Like, I can't do it tonight. And especially near the end of the podcast, when I think it was 2 hours straight of, and this was, like you said, like the 4th or 5th episode in a row of like 2 hours straight of like, fuck, what are we going to talk about? And, you know, it wasn't that we didn't want to wargame anymore, because at that point we were still playing a lot of games and we were still getting into a lot of stuff. I was still very deep in the Firestorm Armada, and you know, we were watching Spartan Games slowly implode and calling that shit a year ahead of time when their fucking Halo license bombed on them. But you know, a big question that I'm sure people have is sort of, why did I quit? Right? Because that's sort of the biggest thing in terms of like my relationship to my life, to the podcast, that's happened in the past couple of years, is that I got to the point where I just had enough and it wasn't worth it anymore. The Spartan Games debacle was sort of the tipping point for both myself and Matt, when we were sort of looking at all of this shit that we had piled up and came to the conclusion that it was all worthless. And even when it came time to try to sell our stuff, it was almost impossible to sell it. It was almost impossible to sell the Firestorm Armada stuff. I sold my Lizardman army, which won a Best Painted award that I won a tournament with, that was like 3,000 or 4,000 points worth of Lizardmen painted with 2 cases. I sold it for the price of one of the cases. And it was like $200 total. Because I couldn't sell it. And that was after trying to sell it at 3 different Bits Bazaars. And that became the thing. It just became, I don't care what you want to give me for it. Just give me something for it. And I did that for almost 2 years, just trying to liquidate all the stuff that I had. Matt, it was even worse. Holy shit. Matt had, I mean, if anybody remembers Matty when he was playing games like X-Wing or Star Trek or Warhammer or anything like that, he would go out and buy everything. And if he needed duplicates of it, he would buy double the duplicates he needed, because you never fucking know. And that was like a regular thing for him. And so when it came time for him to sell it, he had a storage locker. He had like a whole room in his condo. He had stupid amounts of stuff, like 20 grand easy worth of stuff. And I think in total, he got like $3,000 or $4,000. And like that took an incredibly long amount of time to do. Just giving the shit away.
And listen, I get it, because I still have all of my Firestorm and all of my fucking Planetfall, like basically all of my Spartan Games stuff I still have, because the resale market was fucking non-existent, and moving to a smaller, much smaller place, there was no chance. Like, I wouldn't even have been able to give it away. So I literally have space in my home that for the last 3 years has just been like old Firestorm fleets, because as you know, I have my Terrans, my Rothosa, my Pathogen, and my Aquans. Like, I've got 4 fleets. I would like to only have one, because eventually War Cradle is going to release a beta and then a new set of, you know, and then a new edition. We're talking probably best case scenario, beta this year, new set of rules 2 to 3 years out. Best case. But there's
that
no
said,
fucking.
I couldn't cut ties with any of my shit, right? Like I still have my Orc and Goblin army for 40K, my Space Orcs. I still have my vampire counts, and I still have my Directorate corporate fleet because I just couldn't do it entirely. Like I couldn't completely destroy the last 15 years of my life to the point where I just said like scorched earth, throw it in the garbage. I couldn't do it. I just couldn't because I still love my Space Orc army, and I still love my vampires. I still love my Directorate fleet because those things are still very special to me, and it's always going to sort of hold a very warm place in my heart when I look back on all of that wargaming time, and I look back on the podcast time and all that kind of stuff. But
well, and the other thing is, Kanan is even getting to an age now where even if you started a small game with him, that would be something interesting because that's something that even like my kid, who's turning 11 in less than a month, she's started to show an interest. And so last year,
speak of the devil, here comes Kanan.
Hey, last year at Adepticon, she actually played Warhammer Underworlds in the tournament there, and she fully painted her own. I mean, Warhammer Underworld, she played Mollig's Mob, so I think it was 4 or 5 minis. I think it's only 4. But she was so excited for it because we used to play it together often. And I said, if you're going to Adepticon, you have to paint it. She actually started setting her alarm before school earlier so she could wake up. She could do a little bit of painting every single day before school. And now she's getting into, another game because, again, unfortunately, as I said, I still have the, new game. Go, 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 go. ADD. And so like she's even getting into a new game that she's already registered and signed up to play this upcoming Adepticon in March. So I mean, like, going Scorched Earth makes no sense because, it was a part of your life for so long. And
I still buy $600 worth of randomly packaged D&D minis every time they release a new set because I can't just have no hobbies.
Right.
This is still a part of who I am. Like it wasn't like that part of me just went away. I own all the books, all the magic cards. I have a bar height table with a TV that I plug my Surface into. Like I still go whole ham on everything that I do. I spent 6 months writing a campaign like the one I'm running for you guys to the point where it's like I devote my attention to these things, right? I designed the map of the Pocket Dimension amusement park that you guys are now stuck inside of.
Oh my God. I cannot wait to get back to resolve that because I have been talking through my plans to try to convert the train to my religion.
That's right. Yes.
With Terry.
Spats.
For so long that she's even getting sick of it.
Listen, I can tell you, this is going to happen. We're going to continue the campaign. This sort of fun interlude is sort of the best place for it to pause, believe it or not, because like for those of you who don't know, I've run now, this is the 3rd campaign that I've run for you and Terry and Matt. And then we've had other people come in. Daryl was in the other 2 for a period of time. After doing the book campaigns and going through all that kind of stuff, I wanted to do something special and do something a little bit more serious because you guys have actually turned into very good role players. Weirdly enough, it's strange to me that it happened considering where we started. But at this point, you spend more time role playing than you do pushing for like the next combat sequence. And that is a very interesting thing to see happen in like a live environment for people who I've known for such a long fucking time. I designed the campaign to be a certain way to put all 4 characters at odds on a regular basis. I constantly fucked with you in the sense that when the campaign started, we did 4 session zeros, 1 for each person, where I basically said, this is your race. You have to choose this is your class, and you can subclass, but you have to have at least this many levels in this. And then I said, and then here's the backstory. And I lore dumped this backstory on you, and I said, okay, this is what we're doing. Game 1 goes by, and I immediately pull the rug out from under all of you, and then immediately change your characters on the fly.
Yep. Every one of us. And I was like, the fuck?
Well, what was great about it was the fact that like you drank the potion, so you could like you were the first person to have your memories unlocked, and I was like, everybody else take your headphones off. And then when everybody came back, it was just that interaction of like, well, Nathan's character is a crazy person now, and we can't take him seriously. And you're like, I can't say anything. Like, just that whole interaction. Like, I've gone back and listened to the recording, as shitty as it is, and it's like, that's gold. I love that shit. Like, I latch on to that emotion and that like interaction more so than I ever did with wargaming, and more so than I ever did with a lot of other stuff that I put my time into, right? And for the longest time, it was like, we're going to do this. I'm going to record it. We're going to edit it. We're going to put it out for everyone from Jaded Gamercast so that they can see it as well. And, you know, like, we're going to do this whole big thing. Hold on. My daughter's now texting me. Dude, this is the joys. This is the joys of parenting. I'm not even going to edit that out.
Parenting.
Yeah. So, again, the big reason why I left the hobby was I wasn't feeling anything like that. I wasn't feeling anything that was making me go like, oh, yeah, like that's the juice. A lot of what got us into wargaming in the first place was sort of that initial curiosity of like, ooh, what is this? And then realizing that we were incredibly competitive people. And then as soon as you lost that first game, like as soon as you got your butt fucked hard that first game, you never turned back. You were like, well, this can't happen again. This will not stand. And then we would put hours and hours and hours into constructing these lists, building strategies, texting each other constantly, coming up with these ideas, refining our list, playing test games. And we did that for years, years and years and years and years, always with diminishing returns, always with the next tournament, I had less fun. The next tournament, I was upset by the format. The next tournament, you know, Nathan won all 4 games, had his painted army done really nicely, and lost to a guy who only won once because the tournament was shit. You know?
Like, I know exactly the tournament you're talking about.
Like, again, it just continued to go that way. It just continued to be a game of diminishing returns. And even when I said, like, you know what, I'm done with tournaments, I'm just going to play for fun, I wasn't having fun anymore because I could never turn off the competitive part of my brain. When I got into Dungeons and Dragons, and this was before I called it quits on my wargaming career, it was the same feeling. It was that feeling of like, yes, like that curiosity and that need to do it bigger and better and continue to go. The difference is there hasn't been diminishing returns. It just keeps building. And, you know, we're on this 3rd campaign now, and it's the best campaign now. And everybody's into it. And I was talking to you once we put this campaign on hold. I said, I kind of want to start a new campaign now. And I can tell you...
Because I recommended that book. And as soon as you're like, I want this kind of campaign, I was like, holy shit, I'm in.
Oh, I've written it. I've written it.
So excited.
Like, listen, here's the thing. I already have players for it. I just have to actually pull the trigger and like message everybody and go, hey, everybody, you're all going to be part of this new campaign. And that's what we're like. That's what I'm at. That's the situation I'm in. I'm excited for everything that I do. And it was such a long time ago that I felt that from wargaming, tabletop wargaming. And that's why it's changed so much for me. And like a big part of this podcast, if we continue to do it, is going to be me talking about Dungeons and Dragons and giving DM tips and talking about story building and things like that, if that's something people are interested in. Which from the comments on my post, I think a fair amount of people are interested in it.
Yeah, and I think that's great, and I think that like that's one of the things is it's going to evolve because you know what you said is both 100% true for me as well. It was always a game of diminishing returns, and that competitive side was there. But I kind of went the exact opposite route, where I basically I now collect games that are so niche that people are just happy to play. And that's what I was saying, earlier about my favorite game, which is Wild West Exodus. Just so we're clear,
wow,
that one with the worst demo.
Yeah, I remember.
But like basically, so last year at Adepticon, I played 3 different games, and 2 of them I did not have fun at because it was too competitive. Because I still see that within myself, I still find that there are times where I start falling into that slippery slope, for me anyway, where I start to take things a little bit too far. And I actually stopped playing War Machine in its entirety, and took like 100 steps back because it was getting to the point where I was starting to map out like fucking tournaments that are like 3-hour drive away. I can do one this weekend and then one this weekend, and I can go do practice games over here because did you know one of the best players in the world, he plays every Tuesday and it's only like 45 minutes away, so I can go do that. And like that desire to be ultra competitive, it never went away because it is a part of me. Like you said, we discovered we're all super competitive people, but I also have learned that that ruins games for me. You know, like,
I learned that about you a while ago. Even in Dungeons and Dragons, that is still the case.
Yeah, like I become so obsessive about it, and it's 100% my my ADD. I will fixate on something. And nothing can break that fixation. Every moment of every day is spent making characters, building lists, lurking on forums, like math hammering in my head. Like every single moment is spent obsessing. And I've now gotten to the point where when I feel myself starting to obsess about a game, I stop playing it entirely and I go find another game because I still love painting. I paint all the fucking time, although December and Christmas and all that has been garbage for my ability to paint because Christmas. But it's just like I paint all the time and I love it. I've got a couple of friends nearby, like, you know, local friends that are as chill as I am, that I can just like, hey, want to go play this game? And we can literally just drink and fucking throw dice and laugh, and it's great. And I do so few tournaments, but if they're too competitive, it's starting to ruin it for me. So I'm really just trying to find like those small niche games. People are just thrilled to have a chance to play with their toys. Yeah. That's the vibe that I actively seek out.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's the same thing for me in Dungeons and Dragons, because as soon as somebody hears I'm a DM, it's like, hey, you mentioned something about being a DM. We really need a DM in our group. You know, you haven't met these two people, but would you mind DMing for us? And so I have 2 new friends because of that, which has actually been a really great time. But it's the sort of like, I have been told I'm very good, you know, and as much as I love that, I also get very awkward around praise. And I know you're the same way, where you're just like, I love praise. And then if somebody's like, dude, you're really good at this, you're awesome, you're like, dude, shut up, fuck, what's wrong with you? Right? Like, and so that sort of becomes a thing. And I've also fallen into this thing where what I've noticed is that as soon as I DM for somebody, they don't want to DM for me anymore. Right? And then that just goes out the window. So the only person I can find who will DM for me is Daryl. And I think after this last time, he'll never do it again. He might do like a one shot, but I think he's so tired of this vampire campaign. Last time we talked to him, he's like, hey guys, literally like 2 sessions and we're done. Okay. We just gotta get through this shit. It's not a great campaign. Let me put it that way. It not because of Daryl, but because like the campaign itself is very strange. It's not particularly engaging.
And that's the curse of Strahd, legit there. Yeah.
And that's what we kind of learned after the fact. But the
well, it's kind of what we learned with Tyranny of Dragons. Like, I enjoyed the process. We went through it. I would literally never do it again.
The, like, linear ass, like, you're on the train, and the train goes here next, you know?
Well, yeah. Even when you're like, Rise of Tiamat is super open, I'm like, super open as in, we go to Waterdeep. And then they say, do you want to go to A or B? And your choice is, which one do you do first? And then you go back to Waterdeep and they say A or B. And I was like, oh my God, this is terrible. I'm like, again, the one we're working in right now where it's just like, yeah, you have no idea where the fuck you are. You don't even know what world you're in.
Yeah, I did drop you on a random plane of existence. That
yeah, and I was like, let's just pick a direction until we find water, because I'm a water genasi and I like water.
Yeah.
Well, and then we'll follow it downstream, because eventually that will lead to more water, which usually leads to towns.
Right. Well, even like you and Terry said, right? When like I set the stage for the story, and we had our first game, and I did like sort of the open description of what's going on and sort of where things are going, and you all walk through the portals, and then you all step out onto the moon. I remember like somebody had to take a phone call, and so like we had to pause immediately. And I remember you were like texting me on Hangouts, and you're just like, dude, this is fucking rad. Like, we're on the fucking moon. Like, this is fucking crazy. And again, that energy is something that has not been in wargaming for me for a very, very long time. And it's not like I hate wargaming, but I hate the companies. I despise all of them. I don't like Games Workshop. I hate Spartan Games for what they did. And every time I look at a game company and I go, these guys are different, I was always proven wrong.
Well, and it doesn't help, and I understand this, that the two games, because when we would do content games, when we would grab a starter set and we'd play, it'd be like, yeah, that's neat. But you never go further, and I'd be like, all right, so I have a full tournament size list for this, and then I have a whole nother faction in case someone ever wants to play. I might need 2 factions. Like, I would go all in.
But you had a wife who you could play with, right? Like, I had Matt, so if I couldn't get Matt into it, there was literally no chance. Nobody was playing Wrath of Kings in Edmonton, okay? I can tell you that's true because I still have those boxes. They're one of the things I could not give away for free.
What is hilarious is that I actually found someone in that last year in 2016 before I moved. I found someone in Calgary that also played Wrath of Kings. He lived 4 blocks away from me, would never agree to a game. I'm like, dude, I can walk to your house. Dude, walk to my house. Like, let's just play this game. And he's like, yeah, no, I'm so busy. I'm like, fuck. So I get it. But like, that was the thing, is for you played Warhammer Fantasy and you played Firestorm Armada. Those were your games. Those were the games that you loved. Those were the games that you painted. You had so many factions for each.
I had because all of them.
You adored both of those games. And what happened? Warhammer, like Games Workshop, literally fired all of their fantasy players to make Age of Sigmar, which is 40K without guns.
Right, and now they're trying to rehire all their fantasy players.
Listen,
congratulations, we have a new opening in Warhammer Fantasy. I hear you have experience, and now 4 years worth of money backed up.
Oh my God. The word, like, listen, I could talk about that stupid thing, but I think the only thing that I will say is, why the fuck did they make the announcement? And like that's my question, because basically the announcement was, hey guys, good news, we're going to remake Fantasy, and we're going to support it like we do Horus Heresy, which is terrifying because it means Forge World only, and even more expensive than Workshop, which is bullshit. And they're like, we can't say anything other than square bases, and sometime in the next 2 years, we don't know. We will tell you more when we know. I'm like, this is
like the opposite of building hype.
Oh my God, it absolutely is. I'm like, like, listen, if that's how you want to treat Fantasy, I'm not going to shit on that decision. There are some people who are going to love it, some people that are going to hate it. But what I can do is call you out for the absurdity of saying, Fantasy's coming back. I can't tell you anything because I don't know anything because we haven't decided anything. And sometime in the next 2 years, I'll have more news. Like,
this is why I hate this shit. This is why I can't stand the miniature gaming industry, because as a whole,
it's just Games Workshop that's that ridiculous.
I mean, Spartan Games was pretty fucking bad, dude. When we were calling them out on the Facebook page and Spartan Neil was lying to our faces and like deleting our posts and then like deleting his own post after he would talk some shit. He was like Trump. He like couldn't help himself. He had to get in there and just be like, well, actually, Kickstarter is perfectly reasonable. Like, a lot of miniatures companies like totally use Kickstarter all the time. And then what ended up happening a month later, nobody got their Kickstarter shit and they canceled all the Kickstarter stuff, and like a ton of people didn't even get their money back from that shit.
All right, listen, at least when they went tits up, because it was quite clear that they were running a Kickstarter Ponzi scheme.
Yes, clearly.
But at least when they went tits up, anyone who backed only this Firestorm Armada one got all of their money back, because it didn't.
Yeah, it
the campaign did not end before they had to cancel it, because they were literally like, today we're in business. Tomorrow the landlord has repossessed the building and we can't get in, and like all the locks are changed and we're fucked. So fuck it, we're out. But yeah, those poor Dystopian Wars players, because we even called it. We even said, like, legitimately, like, guys, this is a ripoff. This is sketchy as shit.
Don't do it.
This is a company that has never needed Kickstarter in its history. Like, they started, I mean, all they ever did was release the same game. Fantasy boats, spaceship boats, steampunk boats, and
Land
in that
boats.
in land boats, and in that first edition, the rules were identical, literally identical.
Well, and even we talked to the people who had done like playtesting with them, and we talked to the people who were like sort of in with the company, and there was a lot of like very intense negativity in the sense that they said, well, like, this guy, fucking Spartan Neil, is controlling everything. He's got a fucking chicken choke grip on that entire process, to the point where, like, even the playtesters, when they would provide feedback, it wasn't being used. And then he would say, like, well, we want these. How about light cruisers, but only in this starter box? How about this, but only here? How about, instead of releasing models for the ships that have been in the game since the last edition that we haven't created ships for, let's build new ships that nobody asked for, nobody wants, and rules are shit to the point where they're not even worth taking. Well, like, you remember when we went through, it was like 30 some ships and 2 of them were okay?
Yeah, totally. But like, even then, it like with Neil, it was even worse,
still really
because
salty about it.
Because he had such bad ADD that the only game that got supported was the game he was excited about right fucking
at the
now.
time. Correct. Yeah,
so like, I remember like being a Firestorm player when he was like balls deep into Dystopian Wars, and you wouldn't get fucking anything. You wouldn't even get blog posts talking about how your game is a thing,
right?
Because it was just dystopian. Then Firestorm 2.0 comes out. It's 2.2.0.
Or 2.2.0, yes.
Fuck off.
The new rule book.
Yeah, the new second edition, right. Not to be confused with the second edition that we sold you last year. But like, he was so excited about that like literally Dystopian Wars players stopped getting anything. Like, I think in that full calendar year, because he got new Firestorm, he created Planetfall, and let's be real, Planetfall has to this day some of the coolest minis ever. I feel comfortable saying it.
I really like the Planetfall stuff.
The
it was always super rad.
Yeah, the minis were so fucking cool. So he creates a new game in that universe with the coolest fucking minis. They get monthly releases for the first 6 months. Then you can tell he got bored. Meanwhile, Firestorm is pumping out, and I think over the course of those like 9 months before he's like, surprise Kickstarter, I'm broke, there was like 2 Dystopian Wars releases. Like, these were the problems with Spartan. But like I said, they went tits up. And so the 2 games that you played that were your games that you adored,
correct,
were both just like, congratulations, it's garbage.
Well, and not
like,
even just
both
that, but I couldn't,
worthless.
I couldn't find my place in anything else because I was jaded. I was salty about it. And it was one of those things where, I've always been the early adopter, right? And I know you have too, in the sense where when somebody says, hey, let's get into this, I'll go buy everything. And then nobody else will, right? Or we'll say, hey, let's do this. And then nobody will do anything. One of the great things about Dungeons and Dragons, and one of the things that sort of kept me coming back, is that so long as I've done that, it doesn't matter if you haven't read the rulebook, and most players don't. So long as I've read the rulebook, we can just play and have a great time. You don't actually have to own anything, because I can just point you at a free app, and I can just say, hey, show up at this free website, and let's play some games. And it always works. It's never failing. And then the people who really want to get into it. They buy all the shit. They go for it. They customize their models. They order them in. They paint them. Whatever. But it's never that issue of, even if Wizards of the Coast goes tits up and they start doing Kickstarters for rulebooks or some shit, right? But
they got that Hasbro money, and Hasbro owns Death Row Records now, so that shit ain't happening.
Even if that happens, it's not going to affect me, because as much as we always like to say, well, you could always just go back and play the last edition of Fantasy as long as you want, that never worked for me. And for the longest time, I couldn't put my finger on it, right? And what it came down to is I didn't want to be that guy who always said, like, third edition was the best edition of 40K, so that's all we play. right?
Yeah.
Because then you're just locking yourself into like a very small group of people, and nothing ever changes. Because what I liked about Warhammer 40,000 was that the landscape was always changing. I could see something different. The problem was it changed into something fucking stupid. You know, you and I think the last tournament we played together, where we were playing Star Trek, we were playing Firestorm Armada. After it was done and we played our games and we got our awards, we went around and we watched the 40K games.
Holy shit.
And we got to a table where it was Tau versus Space Marines. They both lined up. They both had their Aegis defense lines, and neither of them would be willing to leave their deployment zone.
Well, that was the thing.
It ended in a tie.
Yeah, the three of us were there, right? And we saw both armies behind their Aegis defense lines. So we're just like, oh shit, they just set up. And then I remember one guy going, all right, so
reaching over, shaking the other guy's hand.
Yeah, they shook hands and like, I guess it's a draw. And I was like, what the fuck do you mean nobody moved this game? You literally
that wasn't the craziest thing.
You both threw dice at each other for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then we're just like, man, what a good game. Nothing happened. And I was like, I can't even with this game.
Well, and the craziest thing about that was we look over, there's like 3 other tables doing the exact same thing.
Well, but see, that was actually like, that wasn't the last tournament we went to.
I don't remember.
No. The reason I remember is the last one we went to, we, standing over 100 feet away, started playing a game of Count the Imperial Knights.
Ah, yes. That was a good time. Was that Onslaught? That might have been Onslaught.
Yeah, that was an Onslaught. Yeah. We had just finished our round in Firestorm, and we're standing like 150 feet away, being jerks. Really, but I mean, like, funny jerks. That's our brand.
You know.
And I was like, Count the Imperial Knights, and like each of us were like 25, 26. Like every fucking table had it. And that's one of the things that I've said. Is I was like, listen, I started playing fucking Warhammer 40,000 in 1998. I picked up Fantasy when I started working with you back in 2005. These games shaped me. These games, the way they were played, the way fucking Warhammer 40,000, 3rd and 4th edition, because those were the most formative editions for me, and the way Warhammer Fantasy 7th and 8th edition existed literally shaped me and my preferences. And Games Workshop has now moved on to the point where their games, 8th edition 40K, Age of Sigmar 2nd edition, do not even resemble the games they released 22 years ago when I first got into it. And it's not an issue of this is a shit game, because I can't stand here and say, hey, 98% of the miniature wargamer community who fucking plays Workshop exclusively, you're all fucking morons. It's just that the game is no longer my game. It has evolved to the point where it is unrecognizable to the things that I enjoy. And as a result, I just...
that they later abandoned.
Well, yes, absolutely. And I mean, like, I can talk about the differences between like modern 40K versus old 40K when I started, but like at the end of the day, the types of games that I enjoy were literally created by Games Workshop, but Games Workshop abandoned them and they evolved, and I never did. And so I can say Workshop isn't for me. I don't play any of their fucking games because what they are now is unrecognizable to me. Mm-hmm. And there are other games that scratch that same itch. Because Games Workshop with their retail branch, which we both worked for, like I said, it's not how we met, but it's how we became friends.
That's right.
They did an exceptional job of creating minis gamers. Because even listening to you, when you're just like, hey, I don't play anymore, but I couldn't get rid of it because I recognized that it was an important part of my life. And there may come a time where I may come back to these things. It may be a part of my life again.
Right.
That is something that Games Workshop with a retail branch managed to do that no other fucking company ever has, because it feels like every other company is just trying to be like that parasite on the Games Workshop whale. Like, hey, you're doing all of the legwork, and we're just going to try to scoop up people who get tired of your bullshit.
What I keep coming back to is that, like, I don't look back on it negatively so much, because I think my time and my experience was well spent. The money was not well spent, but my time and my experience was well spent. And it really came down to just the way that these companies are managed, or mismanaged, should I say, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and that is what soured the experience so much, to the point where it was very easy for something like Dungeons and Dragons to come in and say, hey, how about you take all that creative fluid? How about you take all that creative juice and you put it in the right direction? How about you fuck the right girl and, you know, you get her pregnant, and then she's not going to leave you with a baby? I don't know. This is a metaphor that got lost on me. What I'm trying to get at is that, you know, it was they left the door open for other things. And similar to what you're saying, where the Games Workshop sets the stage and everyone else is there trying to leech off of it, scoop off of it. Even still, we did that for an enormous amount of time, and it was very, very hard to get other people to do that, because, to be perfectly honest, the attrition rate for the miniature gaming industry, once you get to that level of, like, I go to tournaments, is actually really low. I was talking to Ward. He still runs Onslaught.
That's incredible. I mean, you know what? Good for him.
Yeah.
Onslaught was a great tournament. It was fun. And the fact that he still runs something.
Still plays 40K, still does his thing. Scott still plays. You know, like, there's an enormous amount of people that I know who still play on a very regular basis, because, again, that attrition rate is incredibly low. So when I got out of it and I started going in a different direction, there weren't a lot of people came with me. There weren't a lot of people who got into Firestorm unless, like, we were doggedly trying to get them to get into Firestorm. And it was an easy transition. That's all I want to get into. I don't want to belabor this to the point where, like, all I'm doing is we're repeating ourselves over and over again for the next little bit here. But, like, one of the things that I want to talk about, and one of the things that, you know, I think is important, is that if we're going to continue to do this podcast, there is going to be a far less focus on miniature wargaming. We're still going to talk about models. We're still going to talk about things, because I've been staring at this Kayvon Shrike model for the last 45 minutes, and it's ruining my mood. But, like, for me,
it's so fucking bad.
I really, really do want to focus on what I'm passionate about, right? And I think there's so much stuff out there. There's so many good places to go to get information on Dungeons and Dragons, comedic videos for Dungeons and Dragons. You know, Dungeons and Dragons is becoming its own live TV service, to the point where, like, regular people tuning in on a regular basis, like, it's a big deal now. Which is weird for me, because I've been doing it for a long time, and it was not a big deal for a really long time. You know, now it's like, you know, my cousins, you know, from my cousin's kids, you know, in the States are like 13. And I go, oh, what are you guys doing at school? They're like, well, you know, we're not into Fortnite anymore. We're not into anything else anymore. I'm like, oh, what do you guys do? He's like, you ever heard of Dungeons and Dragons? And I was like, you got me fucking kidding me right now.
I was bored in the shadows.
I was like, you let me teach you something, friend. And so that's sort of become a big part of what I do. And if I'm going to have a platform to talk about it, this is what I'm going to make this. But let's actually talk about this model now, so that I can get it off of my chest. Well, I don't know when this was released. When was this released?
Oh, shit.
It was a while ago.
This year yes, at some point.
Yes, it was 2019 for sure.
Yes, at some point in 2019, like I said, I don't play Games Workshop games, and I am blessed with a community that is local, that is very open to trying new games.
All right.
So at some point this year, they redid Space Marines, and then they started releasing like the mini dexes, like way old school, for the different chapters. And when they redid Raven Guard, we got fucking Linkin Park Cave and Shrike.
I'll one up that.
Okay.
Ready?
Yeah.
My Chemical Raven Guard.
Yeah, it's better.
There it is, dude. It's Jared Leto.
Holy shit.
My Chemical Raven Guard over here. Okay, this is the most emo Space Marine I've ever fucking seen my entire life. But the first thing that stood out to me that blew my fucking mind is that his helmet's off, but he's wearing a mask.
Yes.
Right? Like, when in combat is he going to be like, well, I'd better take my helmet off and then put this mask on? Like, if you're going to wear the mask, just wear the helmet. I get that it hides his hair. I get, because again, I do my hair, I put gel in it, and so like I don't wear a toque, I wear earmuffs that go around the back of my head. You buy them in the ladies section at Mark's Warehouse, okay? That's where I wear, so I understand that. But if I were going
from
into
home,
a
I'm like a
war-
shut-in. I don't do my hair. It's fine. But no, like,
I've seen you on webcams. You've slowly degraded to like homeless levels.
oh yeah, total hobo. Well,
Right.
see, here was the thing: is I actually grew out my beard to the hobo beard for a Halloween costume once, and then as soon as it was done, I trimmed it tight. And my wife looked at me and she's like, "Never again, grow it out." And I'm like, "Okay." Like, yeah. So Terry likes the homeless people. That's all.
fair enough. I mean, I've had a beard for a while. The wife has grown to like it. I shaved it once for again for like a cosplay, and she was like, she's like, go back.
And that's the thing is, like I said, I grew it out because one year I went as a Viking, so I fucking braided the hair, braided the beard, like did all of that, and then the very next day I like trimmed it, and she was like, "Never again." I'm like, alrighty then. But yes,
So
going back to the actual mini instead of my hobo chic.
my question for you is, who on a battle barge cuts Marine's hair? Like, who's the stylist?
Oh, you know they've got servitors for that shit. There was some like fucking
But a servitor can't be gay. You know what I mean? Like, listen, a gay man cut this gentleman's hair.
Yeah, I mean, look how beautifully feathered that is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's even covering one eye.
That's
like, this
right.
is how perfectly
There's a nice part.
it is.
He's clearly has product in it.
Oh, absolutely. But
That's
no,
right.
like you know what's funny is I never even realized it because you're right. He's got the helmet on his belt and he's wearing a mask. But presumably the mask would block the helmet from being put on. So it's like the least practical thing in the world, and I fucking love it. Because for me, this mini just commits so many fucking sins. Like going way back to what we talked about, where the mini sins, where it's just like, you know, first of all, how many chest bandoliers is too many chest bandoliers? Like he's got fucking like, oh my god, like you look at it, he's got 3 canisters and 2 pouches on his chest. You flip him around to the back, he's got another pouch, another 2 canisters. He's got the most absurdly big gun holster, which is hilarious because I have read hundreds of thousands of words of fucking Black Library fiction. They maglock that shit. What is the holster for?
Correct.
Well, like it's just like you maglock your weapons to your fucking armor, so they're wherever you want them to be. So you got a pointless holster, but then he's got another pouch, more canisters on his thigh, and you're just like, holy motherfuck! And let's not talk about the dead bird parts.
Well, okay, I was about to talk about the dead bird parts because here's the thing, right? Like I get that it's Raven Guard, and I have no problem with like I have a feather hanging from my bolter. That's
you
fine.
know what. That's like a wolf tail talisman.
Yeah.
Go nuts.
Listen, you want a little flair? You want a little flair in your Space Marine? I appreciate that. I don't have any problem with that. But then he has 2 more Raven's feathers hanging from his belt, like spares for if the one falls off of his bolter. Which again, cardinal sin, a bolter with a silencer. Go fuck yourself, okay?
I mean, is that or is it supposed to be like a melta pistol? Like I'm honestly not clear.
That's a bolter.
Because,
That's clearly a bolter with like a short mag in it because again, why not? And it doesn't fit the holster that's hanging off the back. So if you 360 to the back, the holster is not the right size for that gun, which is
not even remotely.
So he's got 2 more bird feathers. Then he has 2 raven skulls hanging off of his butt. And then on top of
Raven
that,
claw.
the lucky Raven's claw. Like I feel like you're going too far at this point.
The is also cursed.
Raven Guard are like the Native Americans. They use every part of the Raven, okay? They don't waste any of that shit, all right? It's important to them. You know, the bits and the pieces are used to make up the claws, I guess. I hate the claws. I hate the lightning claws. They're too short. They're hooked for some reason.
I'm okay enough with the lightning claws. I like the fact that they retract onto the on the hand holding the boulder.
Why?
Although it is like those shitty like Spencer's knives where like they're the so you can stab people.
Right.
It's absolutely that, because if you look at the length of the lightning claws on his left hand,
Correct.
they are substantially longer than the slots in the right hand.
Correct.
So I just don't know where they go. For me, I can live with those. If that was the only thing, why does he have reverse lightning claws on his heels? Because the sharp point is pointing up towards his ass, which means like even if he was hurtling down because like, okay, he's got a jump pack, he fucking flies. Even if he was screaming towards the earth, they would
answer
not
this for you.
cut.
I guarantee you the way that these lightning claws are built is when he's not using them and walking on them, they're like this, where they swing all the way down under the foot and they go up underneath, which is weird because then they're going to hit the jets and that's going to throw your maneuvering off because you've got claws like redirecting your jet flow. My guess is that they're supposed to swing all the way forward to the front of the toe, like under the foot, and then they're like grabby claws because Space Marines need traction.
And I mean, listen, as we all know, moving parts never break, and that's why all pieces of technology are nothing but moving parts, because they're reliable as hell, especially in the battle. You'd want that hinge just swinging back and forth.
Yeah. Well, and this is a plastic model, and I think the actual designer fucked this up. I think the person who painted this and built it fucked it up, because if you look at the weird barricade that he's standing on, there's claw marks under his feet. I think the claws are supposed to be facing forward in this model. I mean,
maybe that's the truth. But like I said, you're right that it's fucked up, because you look at it and I'm just like, they're literally pointing in a direction that makes it impossible to ever actually utilize them as lightning claws. Yes. That is the detail that annoys me the most. But again, even when we go back to like sins the model's committing, we've talked about like fucking every part of the Raven being used. But there's even more bullshit flash. Like he's got like the weird fucking Imperial skull square on his belt. He's got fucking purity seals. He's got like, oh my God, I hate this model. And we haven't talked about how stupid the jump pack looks yet.
So I was kind of saving that for last. I think that the model as a whole probably looked really good on paper, right? You know, much like Rise of Skywalker. I'm sure when they were talking about it, it all seemed like a lot of good ideas. But basically what this model boils down to is somebody said, this guy has to look cool. Not cool like Space Marines look cool, but cool like he could pose on the cover of like a kid's pop magazine. You know, he could give out an award at like a Nickelodeon Kids Choice Award. You know, like this guy needs to show up, and like people walk in the room and they're like, how do I get my hair to look like that? Which blows my mind again, because
it's just, why does it look so bad? Like, oh my God. Yeah. I literally, like, when I found out about this mini, I did send it to you, because I was like, I missed the podcast. I need to talk about this. Because, like, listen, the base is fine, but you're totally right. When you spin it around to the back, you can especially see the scratch marks. In order to make them with how this model is posed, he would have had to duck behind it, scratch it,
correct,
and then jump on.
Right.
Because A, the heels don't work, and B, even if they were pointed the right way, the ones under his right foot, if you're looking at it from the back, also don't work with how the right foot is posed.
Yes, correct.
Like, there's no way to come at it from above and land like that. Because again, like, that is the motion that you are assuming. Because when you look at a mini, there are certain focal points that your eye is drawn to. His arm with the gun is a focal point. When this mini is on the table, you're going to notice that. Standing on top of the fucking blasted out bunker is going to give him a height, make him more of a showpiece, which is cool. He's a He's your HQ. Go for it. But like where your eye is drawn are actually fine because it's the hand with the bolter. Great. There's a feather on it. Fine. It's a wolftail talisman. My eye is drawn to the jump pack. And at least from front on, you're like, okay, those are weird, like flak launchers.
It's
but
got smoke launchers, man.
Listen, it's fine enough. But then you start flipping it around, and I'm like, how many moving like fucking ailerons does this motherfucker need?
No, they just don't seem like they do anything, and that's my problem.
They
it's like
really don't. Okay, like
they wouldn't do anything for maneuvering, and it's like when you look at Space Marine jump packs on like normal assault troops, you get the distinct impression that they go up and then they reduce your speed when you're falling. And that's kind of it, right? Like,
and
I can go a direction.
Forward, it's going to push you forward.
Right.
Don't lean too much or you're going head first. You're going to biff it.
Aim, fire, jump, land. I think what they're trying to do with this guy is they're trying to make it seem like, oh, like he can juke and jive, like he's a Gundam, you know? Like, it does not fit with the Space Marine aesthetic. He looks more like a Tau in that way. And it's very, very strange. And again, because they're so focused on this guy has to look cool. He's got to look fucking cool. It just all falls apart. It's, you know, we all had that friend who got to a certain age when he was like, I can't just be the guy wearing the Megadeth shirt anymore. I got to start doing something about my look. You know, I got to start attracting women. I got to start making some changes in my life to the point where I actually care about what I look like. And then he goes and he goes online or he goes to a magazine or he goes to a salon or something. And it's like, he just grabs everything that he can see. I'm going to wear this trench coat and I'm going to wear this hat and I'm going to wear everything. We all know that guy. We know exactly what they do. We know exactly what's going through their head. And then the next time they show up, they look like this. And everybody's like, hey man, new look, huh? Wow. Cool.
Yeah.
Anybody helping with that? No. All you, huh? Fuck.
And listen, on another episode, I might walk you through because I would love your real-time reaction. I would love to walk you through the process in the fluff that will turn a regular Space Marine into a Primaris Space Marine. Because, like, first of all, let me actually, like, before we go there, because like I said, I would have to research again because I know that there are layers of stupid I've forgotten. So I would want to just like freshen myself up. But like, do you know from the fluff what a Primaris Space Marine is?
Nope, I was out before that.
Got it. So Primaris Space Marines are kind of like Custodes. There's just a little more Primarch in them. So they tend to be bigger and stronger and faster and all of that bullshit.
What do you mean by a little more Primarch in them? You're going to have to explain that.
I think listen, also out. So I've kind of gotten all of this like third hand.
They have a third hand?
Right? Exactly.
Is that what this is?
Yes.
Holy shit.
They're dicks because they can't have sex. They're just hands now. Prehensile. They can just grab shit. No. So when Big Bobby G stopped being dying because it's fucking 40K magic, we want to sell a new mini. He put a little more special sauce into the Space Marine gene seed formula, and that little bit of special sauce was having more Primarch DNA, effectively. So it made them a little closer genetically to the Primarchs, which makes them bigger than a normal Space Marine, stronger, faster, more emo, all that jazz. But there is a bullshit, dumb fucking method of transforming a regular Space Marine into a Primaris. So it's not just something that you do with new recruits. And that is why this K-Van Shrike exists, because he is a Primaris K-Van Shrike. I'm not even making this up. I wish I was.
Damn it. Okay.
Oh my God.
Hold on. So you go through the process of becoming a Space Marine, which takes years and years and years.
Uh-huh.
And you got to be tough, and you got to be the best of the best. You got to go through all of the surgeries and the implants and all that kind of stuff. And then you're a Space Marine for 100 years, if you survive. And when all that's said and done, they go, hey man, you want a little bit more? And then Gulamon comes over, he gives you a secret handshake, and spits in your mouth, and then you're a Primaris Space Marine. Like, this is what I'm getting out of this. There's a level of snowballing involved.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's way more jizz than I think that we're all comfortable with.
Oh, that's why his hair got cooler. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
He's trying to. He's going to the right kind of bars, is what I'm getting out of this.
Yeah, the fun bars.
All right, I'm with you. Yeah, that sounds stupid. Listen, I read Horus Heresy. I read Gaunt's Ghosts. I haven't read any of the new 40K novels, any of the new content, any up to date stuff. It's just all the stuff that I used to love. So that's brand new to me.
No. Listen, I am the same way. But there have been a couple of moments where I have, specifically asked John, where I'm just like, what's the deal with the fluff? Because I hear so many people say they're having fun with 40K. And I know that if I were to get back into it, it wouldn't be like I'm going to go play a tournament, because I can literally walk through a 40K tournament hall and see how little fun there is to be had. But again, there's a largish local community that plays 40K. They seem like decent folks. So there've been a couple times where I have made those inquiries to just be like, hey, should I just work on something because there's a local community and it's an excuse to go out and play games? And then I will read, because John will say something offhand, and I'll be like, wait, the fuck? And then I'll go into the wikis. I'm like, oh my god, it's so much stupider than John is leading on. Oh my god. And that's the only reason I know, because I said, I also I'm gonna be real. The last time I played 40K was basically 5th edition. 6th edition only existed for 9 months because Games Workshop sales had cratered so badly that they shat out 7th edition as literally the cheap cash grab. And we talked about it on past podcast episodes, but I didn't play 6th at all. It was literally a 9-month edition. I played 2 games of 7th edition. The first game was pretty fun because I cherry picked my opponent. And then, where I'm like, this is the funnest person I know. And I'm going to set some ground rules that say none of the egregious bullshit. We'll have fun. It was a great game. Then I played another game against the same person. And my second game was like, oh my god, this game is shit. There's nothing really redeeming for me. This is the funnest person I know, and this game is shit. So I never played 7th. I have not played 8th. So
yeah,
I'm not even going to claim that I'm involved in it. The last time I played 40K was fucking 5th edition. So all of the bullshit they've done to the fluff since then, Necrons are now kooky space Egyptians, and fucking Imperial Knights are a thing. And Primarchs are back. Whatever, do what you want with the fluff. Cool. I'm with you. I keep reading the shit I like. I read Gaunt's Ghosts. I read Eisenhorn. I read fucking 30K. Leave me alone. All
right. So I'm going to take us in a bit of a different direction here.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody is still listening to this podcast at this point, and there's a model you want us to review, just go ahead and post it in the Jaded Gamercast Facebook group, and maybe we'll do it if we do another episode of the podcast. One of the things that I kind of want to do, like I said, is talk about Dungeons and Dragons and answer some questions. This is going to be fun because actually, Nathan, you're going to be able to provide some context from a player's perspective, and I'll provide some context from a DM's perspective. So I'm taking a question straight out of the DM Academy, which is a Reddit subreddit. So here's the thing. I'm going to read it to you, and I want your first reaction. All right.
All right.
So this is posted by SpaghettiOs. And he says, I am failing my players as a DM. He says, I'll tell the truth here so that maybe I can get an answer to my problem. Context. I've been with the same group for about 4 of the last 3 years now. We all enjoy sessions, whether it be snacks, the combat, or just hanging out. I've run at least 7 different campaigns / one-shots with this group, and the longest campaign was 8 sessions, and that was a homebrew campaign that we never finished. Here's the problem. When I run a book adventure, they lose interest after 2 or 3 sessions unless I'm always running combat. They don't explore, talk to the characters, skill check, attempt anything unless it is clear, unless it is the clear way to get X done within the story. There's no playing their character or immersion. I understand that that's okay, and we're all here, everyone here is okay with that, but the metagaming is still very high. So I'm assuming that these people came from like a background similar to ours. When I run homebrew, they love the world and for the most part stay interested, but I never have enough to keep them satisfied. They explore the world, but that's as deep as they go. Eventually, I turn the campaign boring by not having enough prepared, because I don't know what they would like. All I know about my players is that they play their character for the skills and for the combat. When I set up dungeons or scenarios for interesting things to happen, they seem to lose interest again. That's it. And he's got a TLDR at the bottom, but that's essentially what he posts. So this is SpaghettiO's problem. Nathan, what's your first reaction to that, given your experience?
So given my experience, I think I agree with you when you said that, like, these are people that are kind of like we used to be. They're probably from a gaming background. Combat is easy. It's the stat rolls. It's things like that. For me, I think that from a player perspective, because he's talking about how, like, even books are boring. Mm-hmm. I think that it is possible that on the one hand, it could be a DM issue where he's just kind of like boringly reading from the books, because it's hard to say. Like, as a player, I can say that, I haven't had a lot of DMs. You were my first DM, and you have made my second and third DMs kind of shit in comparison. And so I'm always like, I will always go back to laying campaigns. Because one of the things that you do is you always try to make it interesting. And I feel like maybe this is because you watch so much TV and movies, but like the way you approach DMing is almost like a TV show. And this isn't just because you do voices, because honestly, like, yeah, the voices are fucking amazing, but I don't think that that's what makes you an exceptional DM. The voices, they help with that immersion, but even when you're reading from a book, like, I don't know when you're reading from a book. And I think that's what I will say, first of all. It is not clear to me when you are reading from a book or when you have taken like a fucking DM prompt from the book and you're running with it. Mm-hmm. And that is an important element, I think, from a player perspective of the DM. Because like I said, I don't know. You could be reading verbatim. You could just be fucking winging it. It's always unclear to me when you're doing what. If you, as a DM, because I've had DMs where it is very clear when they are reading, it is very clear when they are trying to wing it, but it's not seamless. And I've even had DMs that have told me that, no, I can't do what I want to do. And so, like, it's one of those things.
That's always the worst.
Yeah.
I want to swing from the chandelier. Nope.
Why not?
Well.
And so, like, it's one thing for him to say, like, oh, when I try to do this, it's that, but like, how is he presenting it? And that's one side of things. The other side of things is I came from a miniature wargaming background where combat was the only thing that I could fucking stack mm-hmm. and, prepare for and literally know. And thinking like a D&D player took me goddamn years. It took me years to break out of the mold of every problem is a nail and I am a hammer. Mm-hmm. Like, when are we going to go to combat? Because that's what I know how to do. And so, are they there? Have they had an opportunity to try to think outside the box? Have they tried role playing? Have they managed to find hooks that make their characters interesting? Like, this is why I'm like, I don't like for me, I feel like it could be both of them. Mm-hmm. Because if you have, like, I feel like one of the things that helped me the most as a player was when we would have those between sessions conversations, and I would talk about mm-hmm. the things I want to do to role play, and you would steer me away from the stupid towards more actionable kind of things.
Which took some time. There was some
Absolutely.
genuine time where, again, you would tell me about, like, I built this player up to 20 already. I know exactly what I'm going to do. I know exactly how I'm going to do these things. And I remember saying things along the lines to you of like, okay, but why? Like,
Yes.
why are these things happening? Like, why is your character going in this direction?
Absolutely. And so I think before I stop nattering, because I'm so goddamn drunk.
It's good.
I think
You're not nattering. It's good. This is all genuine podcast content.
Perfect. I want to kind of like wrap it around and basically say that the DM and player relationship is like fucking dating. You need to make sure that you are compatible as people. Because I have played games with great DMs, people that have a pedigree that have been personally recommended to me, and they rub me the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like, it is like dating. You need to make sure that you are personally compatible. And beyond that, I feel like you need to communicate. And that communication extends beyond the session. You could be the best storyteller in the world. You could be like listen, Matt Mercer of Critical Role, I'm sure is we've all watched him. We know he's a great storyteller. His creative team and his writers, they help him do all of this. But if he personally irks me, I would be unable to play with him. And that's just the reality, because it is like dating. You are dating your fucking gaming group.
Yeah, and so like I love Jerry Holkins.
Compatibility is there.
Yeah, like Jerry Holkins from like Penny Arcade. Mm-hmm. As a player, is hilarious, and I think he's really funny. He's incredibly talented, but I've never been able to get into his Acquisitions Incorporated, the C Team, just because as a DM, he and I are very polar opposites. So yeah, like you're absolutely right. Like, listen, we all love hand jobs. We've all had bad hand jobs, and there's only so many bad hand jobs you can get before you start really having to sit down and have a conversation with your people. So okay. Let's get to the core of this question. He says, I'm failing my players as a DM. I think that is incredibly aware, and I think that a lot of DMs feel that way all the time. So you are not alone in feeling that you are failing your players as a DM, because I do that all the fucking time. And like I said, I've been told I'm very good, but it's one of those things where like I'll fuck up and it'll throw me off horrifically. It'll throw off my whole game. But one of the things that you talked about here is that you've been with this group for years, 3 years now, and you're not able to find a situation. That can be because of your players. I had a conversation with another DM a couple months ago where he was talking about taking the Pocket Dimension amusement park, because he's actually co-owner of that idea. I was just the person who actually did it, because I'm that guy. But he was like, oh, I want to run that for my group. We spent almost 3 hours talking about this. And eventually what it came down to is I said, you know what, man, this really isn't the campaign for your group. I said, your group is relatively new. They don't do a lot of role playing. I said, I don't think they're going to react to this in the way that you're hoping that they're going to react to this. And, like he said, the homebrew ones people get more interested in, but then eventually they lose interest. What I find is that if you've been with a gaming group for a couple of years and you've run a couple of campaigns and you're starting to feel that like people are losing interest sort of vibe, a lot of times it's because you're giving your players too many options. And let me expand on that a little bit. One of the things that I find really important to drive roleplay, which is what it sounds like SpaghettiOs is talking about here, is to actually take away a lot of player choice. Because usually what happens when you just leave it wide open and you let players pick whatever the fuck they want is that they generally will create a character with a background, and then they will do nothing with it. There's no tie to the story. There's no interaction with other characters unless they are very experienced role players who know that that's how you get involved in a story. For instance, when I ran the game for my Destiny 2 clan, one of the guys in that group wrote me like, a half a page worth of background, talking about how he was involved with Sildar Hellwinter and Gundren Rockseeker as part of the starter kit campaign because he understood that like he needs a connection to the campaign. What ends up happening is a lot of players don't feel a connection to the campaign because what they've done is created a character that doesn't actually fit in this campaign very well.
Mm-hmm.
If you're playing the starter kit where Gundren Rockseeker is purchasing your services to escort a wagon of provisions off to Phandalin, and he's paying you 10 gold, if you are an elven warrior, eldritch knight who, is out in the world to slay dragons, this is fucking boring. This is below your station in life.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes what you need to do at the start of a campaign is actually remove player choice. If not utterly removing it, at the very least saying you are out of luck, you are down and out, you're just getting started. You have to be very clear at the start. And then when the players create their characters, you do actually have to sit down with each character and say like, okay, let's talk about your character a little bit. What about this? What about this? And you have to prompt as often as possible for them to generate that story in their head. Unfortunately, even that's not enough because most players, when they're taking a day to go down the wagon trail to Phandalin and you go, hey, you guys are on the road for the day, so you have an opportunity to talk to each other.
They don't.
There's dead silence and you go, right, you arrive at Phandalin.
It took us like 3 campaigns to finally get to the point where we started talking in character. And I think those are really good points for starting a homebrew. But then I think that, and I'm speaking from a place of experience that did not involve you in any way, shape, or form.
Well, of course not.
No. But like, I'm just trying to like avoid like like you thinking that it is about you, but like
you don't want to like incur my wrath.
Basically,
that I don't need to regulate next game or some shit.
Yeah. Betrayed screeches the brakes. You cave your skull and you're dead.
Yes. No. But, I get where you're going. Sorry.
But like, so I played it was a campaign when we were living in Calgary, and the DM made this exceptional homebrew, and it was super interesting. And he did a lot of the things that you just said to kind of get us all hooked, get us invested in the story. But there came a point where it felt like the legwork that had been done to create the homebrew was more important than the choices we as players wanted to make. And I think that like, that's that give and take, because the DM to player relationship is one of giving and taking. You are facilitating our play. If we're going to make a sports metaphor, you are like the referee who even wrote the fucking rule book. Mm-hmm. Like that's where you are. You, by your very presence, allow us to have a game. But at the same time, when we are making choices and we as players get excited about something, it's your job, even if like, fuck, you haven't prepared for shit. You never even thought this was a throwaway bit that was setting a stage. You had no intent, like
Erebrand,
like fucking Erebrand. Like this was a throwaway bit, but we all get excited about it. You have to, as a DM, be fluid enough to kind of roll with it and keep our excitement. Because, if you have a group of players that just can't stay invested, I feel like, either you're doing a bad job hooking them at the beginning or there's a problem happening to maintain their interest.
Yeah.
Because even when I was, even when we were starting, even fucking Horde of the Dragon Queen, which literally was a Donkey Kong minecart level.
Yes.
Jump in at the beginning, jump over the fucking bees and the gaps, and you'll get to the end. There really was no choice. We were still, you still managed to do those things. So even when my wizard bullshitted a nat 20 on a history check, I shouldn't have known.
Yes.
We were able to run with it. And you were able to adapt.
Well, for Rise of Tiamat, right? Like we did Horde of the Dragon Queen, and for Horde of the Dragon Queen, there's like a table that you roll on, and it says, here's your interaction with the story. Here's why you're going to the town of Greenest. And, Horde of the Dragon Queen is good that way in the sense that it gives you an early character hook that allows you to sort of get into it. It's not just you all meet in a bar somewhere and you all have a note from some baroness. A lot of it comes down to, they're giving you this into the story, and then they expect the players to make up the rest. And actually, that's sort of the opposite of the way that I tend to DM. The players will drive a lot of it. A lot of the player interactions, like, the conversations that you and I, or Daryl and I, or Matt and I, or Terry and I would have between the games would dictate a lot of how the story would evolve. But by the time we got to Rise of Tiamat, there was a whole section of the game that I co-opted to essentially allow you to expand on your characters. And it wasn't just, hey, each character is individually special in their own way. Congratulations, thumbs up. It was like, here's why it's important to the story. Here's why you should care. Now, one of the things that he says in his post here is he goes, eventually I turned the campaign boring by not having enough prepared because I don't know what they would like. That is a trap. That's a wholehearted trap. Do what you would like. If you like it and you're excited and you're amped up for it, the characters, like the players, will generally respond to that. If you've been playing with these people for 3 or 4 years, it's very likely that you guys are friends and it doesn't really matter what they like. That's sort of a weird DM's way of looking at it, but like, I didn't ask any of you guys whether you would like the Pocket Dimension amusement park. I just did it because I was like, fuck you, you're going in. And at one point, somebody was like, maybe we shouldn't go in. And I like nudged you. I was like, no, you're going in. Listen, this is what's happening. So that we could get that part started because I was excited about it. I wanted to do it. And then everybody's in it and they're having a great time. Don't be afraid to do what you like. Right? Don't, because your players are waiting for you to tell them what to do. Very rarely do you have really experienced Dungeons and Dragons players who are utterly independent of you as a DM, right? Like Critical Role is a good example of this, where what will happen is that, Matt Mercer will drop them in a world and then he will say, okay, what do you want to do? And he won't even give them a hint to the story. He'll just be like, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? And shit goes all over the place. They waste enormous amounts of time in places that they shouldn't be going. But like that builds character and it's a lot of fun and they're engaged by it. When you look at Chris Perkins as a DM, he is somebody that I had to learn a lot from. Because a lot of people as DMs do exactly what you were talking about, Nathan, which is they go, no, actually you can't do that. No, that doesn't actually work with the story. No, you know what? You guys aren't going to go to Winterfell. You're actually going to go down here to King's Landing, right? Like, you don't have to do that. If you watch Chris Perkins, he just says okay to everything.
Oh, he totally does. Like, I think the moment that encapsulates that the best is when they had, and listen, don't at me for spoilers of like a 5-year-old Acquisitions Incorporated episode. Go fuck yourselves. But it was the moment, like, it was one of the first ones that I think you showed me where they just stolen the dragon's egg. They were on their flying ship. And then at one point he's like, I want to ram a dragon with like the fucking like spear point of our flying ship. What check do I need to make? And Chris Perkins is like, I don't fucking know. Let's go with, intelligence.
Dexterity.
Yeah, dexterity. Like, whatever. And then they even, like, made a joke about it where they're just like, are you telling me that Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition does not have the rules for impaling a dragon with my dirigible? No sale.
No sale.
And I was like... But, like, that was the moment where you get the idea that with Chris Perkins, he is always going to say yes, and he's going to just fucking roll with it and figure it out, and he's going to fudge it to make sure the players are having fun.
Very much so. And when I say restrict your players' options, restrict their choices, I don't mean their story choices or the choices of their actions. And you do have to be, like, if you're conscious enough to say, I'm failing my players as a DM, you're obviously conscious enough to know, is that because I'm not giving them the options or they're not taking the options, right? When I DM for a new group, especially people who don't play Dungeons and Dragons a lot, what I will do is I will very regularly interject myself into their decision-making process, where I'll say, you do have some knowledge of this. And then I'll make it clear that, like, hey, you guys are new, so I'm going to give you some hints and stuff like that. But, like, go crazy. Like, just do whatever you feel like is the best thing to do. Because most people only think within the realm of their skills. Or they only think within the realm of, like, I can cast Fireball. That's what I do, right? There's not a lot of people doing the Patrick Rothfuss thing of, like, is there a chandelier nearby, right? So... you have to actually open the door hold the door open for them sometimes to start getting them into the mindset of saying, I can just do whatever the fuck I want. I can start doing these things. I can start really playing the game. For his situation, for Mr. O.O. SpaghettiOs, what I would recommend that you do is start a new campaign and take the time to restrict your character choices. I'll use this campaign that I did with you, Terry, Nathan, Matt, and John. When this campaign started, I said, you are this race. For your particular case, you were a water genasi. I said, you live on the elemental plane of water in this city. You must play a cleric. Or, if you want a multi-class, at least 2 levels of whatever your multi-class is has to be in cleric. And then
you even told me life cleric. You didn't even give me the freedom of my domain, which is fine because at least in our instance, you have experienced 5 years of me talking about the life cleric I want to play, and then always picking a druid that I'm unhappy with.
That's correct. Yes. Until I made your druid a celestial god being, but. And then what I said is, like, now let's talk about your character's backstory. They must be within this age range. They must be this type of alignment. They must be this type of person. And then I gave you the lore dump of everything that was the lore for the campaign as it pertained to you within the story. And then I said, okay, now let's talk about this character. Let's build this character. And we have like a 2-way conversation. Everybody gets a magic item to start. And for this campaign, I started you all level 5 because you were all already like well-established characters. That was the idea.
Yeah, we were the best of the best.
You were the best of the best. The unerring souls.
Yeah, you were not going to be some level 1 schlub. So right. I kind of appreciated that.
Yeah, and again, you guys had done some campaigns with me, and I don't think anybody was eager to go back to level 1 and like grind through the first couple of levels.
Well, especially because we finished fucking Rise of Tiamat, and we were what, level 16?
Yes.
Jesus, like so to go from that where Fular was effectively a god.
Yes.
With my like level 10 druid, level 6 ranger, I could fucking do anything, and then to go back to a level 1 with 7 hit points, no.
And that was a big part of it, but then. What I did as a DM is I wrote the story regardless of my players and incorporated their characters that they created, that we created as part of that session 0, into the story so that when the story started, all of their hooks were in the story. They were intrinsically linked to the story. Listen.
And to each other. And I think that is a big thing because even though I fucking love John, if he called me right now and said, I killed someone, I would literally be out there to help him dispose of the body. I fucking love John. I have to
edit this part out because that's evidence.
Right? I fucking love John. I love Matt. Obviously I love my wife. Like, I love all of these people. But when we don't have hooks, it kind of gets weird. Like the beginning of not even Rise of Tiamat. It was Horde of the fucking Dragon Queen. When Maddie was just behaving shady as shit, and we all decided that, like,
he was part of the cult.
He's part of the cults of the dragon. We fucking, like, bound him and stripped him naked, and we were going to kill him. Like, for fuck's sake. So having that hook gave us a reason to interact. It gave us a reason to not only care about the world you had created, but to care about each other. And that's always one of the big kind of struggles Because, you know, again, Horde of the Dragon Queen, Rise of Tiamat, where I had to make a new character because my wife killed me.
That was great.
God damn, it was not.
I
made a druid again. God damn it! I made
I
another druid.
But like to get back to the topic here, I think that is something you genuinely need to think about. Is that if you are not putting the time into developing the characters before the campaign even starts, you know that when the campaign starts, there's no character interaction. You know, the campaign that I just started, a guy who I play Destiny with decided that he also wanted to start a campaign, and I actually got to jump in as a player. So I created this unkillable paladin named Barian Thrask, who I build in the rules is basically like he's virtually unkillable. He's so hard to kill. He's a paladin of Pelor or Lathander or whatever you want to call it. So this dude is like, he's basically Zap Brannigan, but he's convinced that he can't die because Pelor won't let him die. And so I'm going through this campaign talking to all of these characters and like explaining his backstory and being very vocal and just getting into it. And, you know, like he's just this, you know, jackass, pompous type person who's just completely oblivious to the world around him, you know, but he's also like a born again Christian, which is like that much better. So it's one of those things where like everybody knows a shit ton about me. I don't know anything about anyone else in the campaign because nobody responds when I talk, right? And the DM is not providing situations that force character interaction. So if you're going to, you know, go through the process of creating this, it's like write your story, make your story, and then say, this is what the story is. So go do something about it. And then at every opportunity, you have to dig the hooks in. You have to be like, actually, you know, you were abandoned by your father as a kid. His father should show up later in that campaign. You know, oh, you know, you were born as an orphan. One of the other players should be your long lost brother or sister. You should be constantly digging new hooks into the players, but don't under-prepare because you don't know if it's something they won't like. Do what you will like.
Yeah, so
they'll come along.
Like, okay, so as a player, the two things that I'm looking for, and it really is just two things. Like, you know, like you said, do what you want. Fucking take me on your ride, Lang. Like, fucking, you know, I've paid admission to this amusement park. I've stood in line. Like, let's fucking do this. The two things that I'm looking for are, one, hooks at the beginning to force our characters to interact. Because by the end of Rise of Tiamat, all of our characters had all of these experiences together that we actually had a group dynamic. You had my druid that fucking hated all things unnatural to life and really had a fear of heights.
Yes, which I then hooked into the campaign later.
Again, which was exceptional, and I'm going to get to that on the in a moment.
Okay,
you know, and then the other thing, you know, because as a player, I want a reason to interact, because you're right. When you're just like, what do you want to do? Or it'll take a day. What do you want to do? When you ask those open-ended questions, especially to new players or people who come from a different background, more focused on combat, they don't know what to do with the freedom. So fucking direct me, especially at the beginning, because it allows us to create these group dynamics. And the second thing that I want as a player is a little bit of guidance. Like, you know, don't just be like, what now? And sit silently and wait for me to think of something, because maybe I'm not in the headspace. And that could be because as a player, I'm not experienced, or shit, I just had a bad day at work and I'm not in the headspace to role play. But lead me a little bit. And if I choose to diverge, run with it, but don't just be like, and now what? Because a lot of the things that you were saying, this is what I was going to get to, whereas like, oh, the fear of heights. One of the things that you do, and this is why I personally appreciate the work that you do as a DM, is you incorporate elements of, you know, screenplay writing and storytelling, specifically Chekhov's gun.
Mm.
And, because for those of you not familiar, Chekhov's gun is a storytelling trope, effectively. It's almost a rule where it says that anything that you spend the time to create in a story needs to have a payoff. And the example is that of a gun. So if in Act 1 you describe there is a gun hanging on a mantelpiece, then at some point down the road in the story, that gun must be used. You
Right.
spent the time,
So
you
when Ray heals
created.
the snake, I don't want to get
Exactly.
into spoilers, but anyway.
Yeah.
Right. All right. Go ahead.
Exactly. And so, even going to the examples that we talked about, when I decided on a lark that my character had a debilitating fear of heights, because in my backstory, this character was they were a wood elf. They were only about 90 years old, and the reason they had kind of left their thing was that they were orphaned, they were found by a human family, and when every member of that human family had effectively died of old age, leaving this character alone again, they decided to go out kind of on an adventure and quest. And so one of the things that I personally had decided was, this is someone who has always had 2 feet firmly planted on the ground. They've always been part of they've always been in charge of their own destiny, where they were going to go. And so there was one point where we had to jump on a dragon's back and they took off above the clouds. And I was thinking, and I was like, my character has never been in this situation, and this would be fucked up for them. So I was like, they have a debilitating fear of heights, like eyes closed, like white knuckling, like panic attack level fear of heights, because they have never, as a druid, been so distanced from the land. And then Lang took that, and months later, like 9 months later.
Yeah, it was almost a year later.
Yeah, it was almost a year later.
Keep in mind that you're also an orphan who was found in the remains of a shipwreck.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you, like almost a year later, Lang takes these 2 disparate details and he marries them in a Chekhov's gun sort of way that explained the shipwreck and explained my fear of heights, and turned them on their head and created a hook that made me go, wait, what the fuck? And so as a player, those are the elements. Like when you take legitimate, like screenwriting, storytelling tropes and you incorporate them, that is going to keep our interest. Because like I said, I don't want you to put me in a box and tell me what I can and cannot do. So if I want to be absurd, and all of the Acquisitions Incorporated I watch has led me to try some Patrick Rothfuss bullshit with you, which honestly is more of an exercise for me to think creatively.
Yeah, very much so.
Than it is an expectation that I can actually get away with this shit.
It's paid off. So it's paid off a few real times. It's definitely paid off. But like for those of you who don't know, I'll sort of explain this from the DM's perspective. Because like I hadn't even thought about it from the perspective of Chekhov's gun. It's just sort of a storytelling trip that I've known for a very long time. But when you originally created this character, we knew that you said, I want to have a mysterious background. I don't know who my family is. And this is the second time you've created a character like that. And it was one of those things where I said, like, okay, we'll do something fun with this. And there were a lot of very obvious choices, you're a prince, Lone Star, shit like that, right? Like, that medallion you've been wearing means that you're royalty. There were a lot of different options to go through, and there were a lot of different things. And it actually wasn't until that debilitating fear of heights that it started to coalesce into something more dramatic. And eventually what happened is they got to this pocket dimension, and in this pocket dimension there was a bridge that like walked out over a void expanse of like this micro galaxy. And I remember knowing when I read it, I was like, ooh, this is the spot. This is where I'm going to start giving him the real clues, because I kept putting you in situations where you're background and family were a mystery and you didn't know what it meant. And I kept putting you in situations where your heights would be a problem so that you were constantly reminded of it. So that when we got to that point and I said, there's a long, narrow bridge. It walks out over an endless expanse of black void, stars and planets spinning around you. There's a sense of disorientation and dizziness that comes from just the massive emptiness below you. Your immediate response was, oh my God, Fular freaks out. And I said, no, actually, you look down over the edge, you see the stars, you see the planets, and you feel at home. And in that moment, you were like, wait, what the fuck?
Well, and even then, you made that disorienting effect hit everyone else. Because I was the last out. Like, I saw the bridge, and I was like, Fular's not going on this motherfucking bridge. Like, you know, like this fear is too ingrained. He's you know, we've been on the fucking backs of flying dragons. We've been on the tops of mountains. He cannot fucking deal with this. And so it's just like everyone else goes on and they're having this disorienting feeling. And I'm like, I like fucking get on my hands and knees. I start crawling. You're like, you're fine with it. You feel at home. I'm like, what the fuck is going on?
So this is what I talk about when I'm talking about taking away player choice, because sometimes you do have to actually inform the character of how they would respond or what they would do, because a lot of times those revelations are not going to come through their portrayal of their character because of the fact that you actually know the story and they don't, right? So Nathan would never know that his character would be fine with this and that he would actually feel at home. And then they walk across the bridge and they run into like a genie who's trapped in a room. And then they make this deal with the genie. And he's sort of like disgusted with them. And what did he say? He sees like, we have made the deal. Now take your star touched and go. And he's pointing at Fular and you're just like, star touched? What the fuck is this shit? And like this all happened in the span of a single game where there were these huge revelations that he didn't understand. And it wasn't until almost 4 or 5 months later when we go to this dream sequence out in Thay, when he actually, in that moment, remembers where he came from and who he was. And I actually like gave you powers based on it. Mm-hmm. He was a celestial being that was like flying, born in space and flew through the sky as a comet. And then he plummeted through the atmosphere into the primaterial plane onto Faerun, and then this comet hits a boat, and the last thing he sees is a family of wood elves holding a child, and so that was what he became, was the child. Mm-hmm. But he kills the family, he kills everybody, and then the child washes up on the shore, and that's who he is. But this whole time he didn't know that he was this celestial being, but then that became a part of his character, which then paid off in the last battle and all that kind of stuff. And you know, I did the same thing with Daryl's character. I did the same thing with Matt's character. I did the same thing with Terry's character, with Grilka. She just failed every intelligence check throughout the campaign, so didn't know until the very end what the hook was.
Because even though the payoff was literally the last episode, because like you even said, like afterwards when we just have like these hangout debrief sessions, you were just like, I gave you like 7 intelligence checks and you never rolled higher than like a 3.
Yep.
So I kept trying to like lead you into like this big revelation.
But it paid off because that revelation hit her at the very last minute of the campaign, and it was like this stark, crazy revelation. But that was not something that I said, it's up to you to do that, Terry. It's up to you to figure that stuff out, because a lot of times the best thing you can do for a character is change it in a way that the player will appreciate. Is to say, like, you know, okay, I create this fighter and he's been out fighting for the longest time and he's an orphan and, you know, he's this and he's that. It's like, if you don't show them something about themselves as part of your campaign, they're only ever going to ride their horse to the next fight. They're only ever going to go to the next town and talk to the next shopkeep or the next bartender. And as fun as that is, it's like, there's nothing there. There's nothing for them to grab onto and go, fuck, I need to figure out what's happening to my character next.
And like, even if you're going to
what does this mean, right? Like,
so even look at the difference between Empire Strikes Back and Attack of the Clones. Empire Strikes Back, what makes it good? Well, what makes it good is all of the character moments. You have fucking Han, Luke, and Leia on Hoth after, they recover Luke
No
from
time to
the.
discuss this in a committee. I am not a committee.
I'm not a committee. You have the fucking asteroids where they're hiding, and like that tender moment, and then and so what makes Empire so good is all of these character moments. There is time for all of the characters to have these things amidst the plot. Now, why is Attack of the Clones fucking terrible? Because the characters do not have those times.
No.
It always feels forced, and it's basically just plot beat, plot beat, plot beat, plot beat, end. And that's the movie.
Well, they're running through the chompers on Geonosis, right? Like, that's the thing. Don't ever make your campaign people running through the chompers on Geonosis. Like, don't just put hurdles in front of them.
And that's exactly it. And so when you run a campaign that is only just like, hey, I've got these fucking 5 story beats, I got to hit this episode, and you motherfuckers, we're going to fucking hit them. You're making Attack of the Clones at that point. When you're sometimes, and especially with D&D, because I do feel like the best episodes of D&D, and whether that's I'm watching them, best episodes of Acquisitions Incorporated or Critical Role or even a session that we're playing, those best sessions are as fun and as exciting and as interesting as if I was watching a fucking TV show. Yeah. And so when you take that time and you give us reasons to talk, even if it's bickering, fucking make us hate each other. Because that was one of the things with the one that we're running through right now. In addition to you have to be a water genasi, you're from this city, you have to be a life cleric. You straight up said, by the way, these are now the fucking stereotypes that you as a water genasi have. Fire genasi, they're all fucking criminals. They're fucking they are the worst people in existence.
They're your shitty neighbors.
Air genasi, they're all kind of flakes. They're like hippies.
They're stuck up.
Yeah, they're super stuck up. Like, yeah, you're kind of like the California surfer culture because you're a water genasi, but like air genasi are all stuck up. They think they're better than you. And fucking earth genasi, they're all peasants. Like they're
stolid peasants who just hate fun.
And so you gave me this framework. So when we started interacting, I have a framework to interact with the other players. I immediately didn't like Charcoal, who declared himself a motherfucking slaver.
Yes.
So I'm like, fuck this guy. Was
Charcoal Cobblestone of the Cobblestone slave trade dynasty. Yes, that was his first introduction.
So fuck this guy was baked in to our player interactions at the beginning. And yes, we've been through some shit together, and I've gotten to the point where I don't hate him, but because of that background, because of my prejudice against Fire Genasi and that initial introduction, I also don't trust the guy.
Well, and there was that moment in the campaign. There was that moment in the campaign where I introduce Terry's sister, and there's this whole big thing, and her sister is this sort of long-lost character. She's fucked up. She's brainwashed. She's a killer. She's killed friends. She's done all these things, and she's sort of locked up, and they're trying to like detox her and like turn her back to the light side. And none of it is going well, but like you have to push forward with the campaign, so you're like leaving her behind. And there's that moment where you and Charcoal, like, Loreth and Charcoal have this moment where Charcoal walks up to you and he goes, you know that if this doesn't work, we have to kill her. And you go, I don't think I'll never accept that option. And then you both nod at each other, knowing that neither of you were wrong. And then you just went on about the campaign. And it was like, in that moment, it was such a good character moment, because it was like the first time that the two of you connected on a level that was like, we both understand this situation, but we both have different ways of saying like this, I'll never do this, or, hey, like even you had to sort of admit that like, we may need to kill this person. And if
And I am a pacifist life cleric who doesn't even draw his fucking weapon in combat.
Correct.
No. But like, that's the point. It's like you baked in, even like, even if it's like bickering to start, we were able to take our characters to places based on.
You were so angry with your wife. Because of the way that she was playing Beryl, her
because
her
like she
fighter.
said after the fact, where she's like, "Well, Lang said like this is like the same as child rape, so of course I can't deal with this."
That's
and
right.
I'm just like, it would have been useful fucking information in the planning stages before you just fucked it all up.
Well, but again, like it creates, because again, I as much as it is sort of out of character of like your competitive nature being like, you fucked up the plan, you were supposed to deploy here, like. It was all in character. Like it was never not in character. And that allowed you guys to become very, very invested in the story and very, very invested in bits of it. Like I think Terry at one point cried during the campaign, and it was like, because of the fact that you're able to create these things, like for John, like John had some insight I never thought he was capable of. Mm-hmm. When the one guy was, Colgan Reedson was like invading your dreams. Mm-hmm. And then he's like, I don't think he's coming to me. He's like, I don't think our people are all that receptive to this sort of thing. And then it didn't happen. And that was my plan I was blown away. I was like, how the fuck did he see that? How the hell did he see that shit coming? Right. And like, there's more to come with that, depending on which direction you guys go in the campaign. But like, the idea is that this is a much more serious campaign. It's we still joke around and fuck around. I mean, you guys refer to yourself as the Planeteers. Your horse that pulls the Planeteers. I'm sorry, the Planeteers. Your horse that pulls the cart is Gale Force 1. Like it's there's still jokes and stupidity in there, but there's a lot of serious content. There's a large quantity of very serious content, and the story will remain very serious.
Well, like, listen. I remember, like, so again, like, yes, it's been a while because real life can be a bitch sometimes. But I remember, there's a period of time there where, for I think a month, we managed to play every single week. Yeah. And we accomplished fuck all plot-wise. Like, let's be real. We started that where it's just like the first session of that month, we managed to get to a fucking city, but we basically just role played for a solid fucking month. Like 12 goddamned hours was just us creating relationships and interacting with each other's, and you let that shit run. Mm-hmm. And when we would do these things, you'd fucking run with it. Because like again, when you're able to create a framework for us to work in, because I think one of the common pitfalls that everyone takes, whether they're a player or whether they're a GM, not everyone is clever enough to work with nothing. Mm-hmm. And we know this because how many people have written full-fledged novels that have been published. So we know that this is a rare skill set for people to be able to create something out of nothing. And that is again, one of the things that you do is you take that Chekhov's gun, you incorporate it, and you create these situations that give us a reason to interact, and you set us at odds. And and you don't always set us at odds. Like don't think for a second that the only thing you can do is set us at odds, because even if we go back to fucking Rise of Tiamat, when you had to basically write a new character for me into this established group dynamic, you were able to create a way to kind of do that seamlessly. And then we managed to hit all of these sort of adventure points, and it gave that new character a point of reference to share with them. And we were able to sort of incorporate and work together in those character forms. So don't take away that everything has to be conflict all the time, but give us a reason to interact. Don't just say it's going to take 2 days to get there. You're going to camp tonight. What do you want to do? Is anyone going to talk?
Who's taking first watch, etc.
Because those were the points. Because like even when you would be more open-ended, I remember when we did that starter set scenario, even when we did Horde of the Dragon Queen, you did try to leave it very open-ended to say, like, hey, does anyone want to say anything? Like, that was some fucking crazy shit, right? It was less to work with than what we have with our current campaign, and even less than what you managed to work in with us with Rise of Tiamat. So, give us reasons to interact, because as a player, I need something to work off.
Even with this campaign that we're running, a large part of what I was doing regularly is, like, if you have a surprise for your characters, like if you have something that the bomb you eventually want to drop on them, you do have to remind them regularly about their hooks. You have to sort of continually remind them. And one of the things that I did in this campaign was that, because this old one brain creature thing that you're sort of, fighting against is continually sort of reaching out to you and fucking with you, and there's these warlocks fucking with you, right? Like, every time you guys would stop and camp and nobody would say anything, I would force a dream on you. And I would be like, in your dream, here's what happens. And they're not good dreams. And it was bad dreams for everybody. And they all had to sort of deal with it. But it was like, I need to constantly remind you. So for Terry, for Beryl, her character, when I sort of pulled the rug out from under her and said, like, you forgot about your twin sister, and this was a thing. And then, the idea was, her twin sister died. Like, everyone died because your daughter died. I also threw that at you. I was like, you had a daughter. She died.
Oh, yeah. And listen, that well of sadness is what changed it, because if you remember, you
started giving yourself psychic damage at times, like I take damage, and I was like, really? You're like, yeah, 3 psychic damage right now.
Yeah, but like, even then, in the first session, I was not a pacifist.
No, you were not.
Busted out my mace. I was trying to swing it at shit. I mean, I was fucking terrible because I'm a life cleric with wisdom out the eyes, but
you're also angry.
And I was angry. But now I internalized that, and I tried to adopt Beryl to try to fill that void within me, that emptiness, that hollowness that I feel. And I lost the ability to harm others. Even though, like, there are fucking creatures trying to fucking kill me at all times. I mean, for God's sakes, there's a one point where it looked like we were all going to die.
Yes.
And I burned my very last spell slot on a revivification for a goddamned NPC because I could not, as a character, lose anyone else.
Yeah.
And like, even though, trust me, in that moment, a mass healing word was fucking needed. We were all banged up and hurt. But for me, in that moment, like, I internalized that switch that you did, where I was like, that loss shook him to his core. It shook his faith, and he is a fucking cleric. Well, he will not allow anyone else to feel that loss.
And like, that's very obvious from the perspective that I'm sitting at, where it's like, you've very clearly now attached to Beryl. And like, you guys, after all that stuff came to light, had a couple of like quiet chats by the fire that were like, relatively emotional and fairly opening. But like, for Beryl, it was a point of like, I need to constantly remind her of this thing. And from the story perspective, it seems like I'm just trying to keep working people up, right? But there's hooks in everything, right? And there should be hooks in everything. So when they're fighting this person, and it turns out to be her sister, and she's been brainwashed and all this other stuff, and it's a big surprise, that did not go the way that I had thought it would go. So I had like 3 or 4 different ways that it could end. One of which is that you just kill the Seeker, and that when you take the mask off the Seeker, you see that it's her twin sister, and she's dead. And then now you need to choose between Erebrant, the NPC, or this NPC. And like, but the way that it went down, where she like crit on the last turn and like shattered the helmet, and then she like looks up at herself and, says her childhood name. That childhood name was never part of the story that she created. It was the part of the story that I created. But I had to remind her of it by saying, this is what you called your childhood sister. And I had to keep having these dreams where she remembers her sister being pulled away into this portal and never coming back, and that she died and she's angry and all these things happen, so that when it happens and then that character says that name, that childhood name, that it triggered. And I remember your reaction was like, what the fuck? And then I said, and we stopped the combat immediately, and that's the end of chapter 1. And oh my God, it went about as well as it could have gone. And again, I fuck up all the time. Everybody does. All DMs fuck up. You always think that that's, you're not as bad as anybody else. It's just, that's regular. All DMs fuck up. We're not perfect. Matt Mercer fucks up often enough. Like, Chris Perkins fucks up. It happens. So tell the story that you're excited for and reduce your character's choices. Really, really experienced characters can sit down at a table with 5 random characters with 5 random backstories and make it work. Most people cannot. Most people need you to direct the story and direct their story to the point where, like Nathan said, there's a bit of guidance there. I'm sort of aiming you in a direction, but if Nathan suddenly decides that his character is afraid of heights, go with that, incorporate that, change what you're doing. Don't feel like you have to be locked in. And I find that a lot of D&D groups do this, where they just create 5 random characters and then they play the game and they roll combat and that's it. They don't interact with anybody, and especially they don't interact with each other. And if you have a game of Dungeons and Dragons, or any role-playing game for that matter, where your characters are not interacting with each other, your players are not interacting with each other, you're fucked. Yeah, you're going to lose interest because it's boring.
So one of the things that you said actually reminded me of something when you said that, like, hey, you fuck up. Everyone fucks up.
Hold on.
Huh?
They're back. I did it.
Oh, okay.
I just put my hands down and smack my headphones out of my ears.
Okay, so what I was saying is, one of the things that you said about how you fuck up, everyone's going to fuck up.
Yeah.
It reminded me of one of the things that I would always say when I was head ref of the Calgary Roller Derby League. I always said, our goal is to ref a perfect game. And that is an impossible thing to do. We will make mistakes, but it is the ideal that we work towards. And I feel like that does apply to DMing. It is one of those things that you can look at and say, like, hey, there's only so much practice. There's only so much pre-work that I can do. Mistakes are going to happen, but how do I just roll with it, let it not affect me, and keep running, with the characters? What are they doing? How am I going to incorporate this? And if I fucked up because I took them left down this path when they needed to go right, can I get them right? Or do I have to change the direction? Am I going to be able to change the story to get it to where it needs to go to kind of hit this plot point while incorporating what they're doing? And I think that's one of the things that you need to do is I feel like
we got to let your players know, if you're writing a linear campaign, if it's on rails and you want the story to traverse and then they're just along for the ride, which is what a lot of book campaigns are like. They're very linear. You're along for the ride campaigns. You have to let your players know that. You have to say, hey, this is what we're doing. Make a character that fits that sort of theme.
Well, yeah, because one of the again, with a different DM, there was a character that I was very, very excited for, and it was very clear, I think, on session 2, because again, session 1 did a very good job, similar things to what you did, where it was just like, hey, this is what's going on, these are the hooks, these are why you all care to work together and function together, and that was fine. But then I think on session 2, we as a group were just we've decided to go to town A. And then the DM was just like, okay, so you arrive at town B. And we're like, well, why the fuck are we here? And they're like, oh, well, the NPC just said something dismissive to you, where it's just like, oh, you don't think they wouldn't know? And we're like, well, they fucking knew what we were doing anyway. So we wanted to go to town A. Well, too bad you're at town B. And we're like, and that was the moment that campaign lost me.
We got very competitive at that point with the DM. I said, then you get very competitive with the DM, where you're just like, no, fuck you. Like, we're not doing that. We're doing this. I think that's a big part of it. I mean, to wrap this up, I think Nathan really nailed what players want, and I think that's a huge part. And the hardest thing about being a DM is that it's almost impossible to nail that down exactly, right? Like, but your goal is to write the story that you will enjoy with the hopes that your players enjoy it too. And if they don't enjoy it, you'll find out pretty quick, right?
All right.
Because they'll start doing random ass shit.
Yeah, and last word. If you are a DM and you fuck it up, because guess what? Lang has.
Yep.
When we were running motherfucking Rise of Tiamat, there was one point where Lang just straight up fucked it. And he started to do something. He's like, wait, that doesn't make any sense. Fuck, I can't go on. It rattled you.
I was upset.
Yeah, it rattled you to the point where you ended the session prematurely. I still consider you to be a fantastic DM because even though you fucked up to the point where you ended a session, I didn't care. Because you know what? We are, as players, understanding of mistakes because we get it. Like, listen, there are times where I will choose to do something and I will hate myself for the rest of the week until the next session when I can fucking fix it. Because I realized I fucked up my character. And so even if you fuck up and you take the moment and you break it, like you break kayfabe if we're going to talk fucking wrestling terms.
Sure, yep.
And you're just like, listen, guys, I'm so sorry. I made a mistake. I shouldn't have done this. I thought we were going to go here and I prepared something. I can't do it. Let's just fucking hang out. Let's shoot the shit. We'll come back next week. I, as a player, am never going to hold that against you because I understand the challenges of what you're going through. Because I've even talked to you where I'm like, hey, have you ever looked at this role-playing game? I'm super excited about it. And you've straight up told me, no, but if you DM it, I'll play. And just the idea of getting to that point is super intimidating for me. It's super scary. It's super intimidating. And so if you're a DM and you need to take that moment because you fuck it up so bad that you fuck up your own headspace and you know that you cannot recover, whatever. Let's toss on a riff tracks. Let's drink some fucking whiskey.
Pull the plug.
We'll hang out. We'll come back next week strong. And we're going to do it strong.
Yeah, exactly.
Do not be afraid. You have permission to be human. And I think if anyone in your group is going to be upset at you for doing that, fire them.
Well, yeah.
You're shitty players. If one of your players is going to be like, I can't believe you fucked it up. You totally ruined my week. They're a piece of shit asshole. Fucking fire them. Yeah,
there's nothing you can do with bad players. Like, there's really just nothing you can do with it. But I think for situations like this, with what SpaghettiOs is saying specifically is that he feels like he's failed his players as a DM. I think that, you are probably not used to being completely in control. And being in control is really, really important for any campaign. Let your players go crazy and they do stupid shit and it gets out of control and you're just like, well, I couldn't have planned for this. One game that I run right now is actually for a group of 3 warlocks, and they're all 3 different warlocks. One's a Kuatoa, one's a Tortle, and one's a human who looks like Jack Black. And it's fucking ridiculous. It's nonstop jokes. It's nonstop stupidity. But I asked him at the beginning of the campaign, I go, do you guys want an on-rails campaign or do you want like an open campaign with like odd story bits that drop? And they're like, we want an open campaign with odd story bits. So that's what we're doing. Everybody knows exactly what we're doing. Everybody knows where we're going, how we're getting there, and who's driving, right? But they still require that I am in control of the campaign at all times, right? So that means I have 6 or 7 maps ready for whichever direction I think they might go. They still go directions that I'm not ready for, right? And so similar to the campaign that I'm running for you guys right now, when I created it, I've got like a whole binder with like a dramatis persona and like all of the characters and their backstories, as well as a map of the area that goes out hundreds of miles where it's like, if they go here, what's there? It's these 2 story beats. If they go here, what's there? So like when you guys went southwest to Daerlin, right? As opposed to going northeast along the trail to Arkenbridge, right? There are two completely different story hooks at either end of that road that have nothing to do with the flow of the plot, right? Because from what I had written, what I had built down was like, chapter 1 is the beginning of the story to Beryl's sister shows up. And you figure out who that is. That's the end. So you guys are now in chapter 2, Misery and Woe, where basically I know what the end of that chapter looks like. And when you get there, that's when that chapter will end. But everything in between is up to you. And whichever direction you go, north, south, east, west, I have something ready for that, right? Now, I don't know if you're going to be fighting in a field or if you're going to be fighting in a sewer or if you're going to be fighting in whatever. I recommend that you go to Imager and just type in D&D maps, and there's like an entire albums of just random maps. Favorite that shit and just have it ready so that you can like copy and paste it and import that shit when you need to, you know? Because it's important to sort of be prepared for nonsense, but also to just never make it so that your players feel like you're not in control of the story. Because believe it or not, most people are too shy, they're not confident, and they're genuinely worried about fucking up the experience for everyone else. So that they're all looking at you as the DM. So tell the story that you want to tell, have fun telling what you're going to tell. We'll leave it at that. That went a lot longer than I thought it would, but that was a good time.
Hey, listen, you're not the only one who loves D&D.
I know, right? I know. But yeah, like this is one of the things I do want to be sort of a regular part of the podcast. If we continue doing it, is sort of just answering questions. So if you guys have questions about Dungeons and Dragons, role-playing games, being a DM, anything like that, feel free to leave it in a comment or put it on the Facebook group. And if we do another episode, we'll talk about it. But hey, it's been almost 2.5 hours. So that has been Jaded Gamercast for this week. My name is Lang.
I'm Nathan.
Have a good one.
Cheers.